All right, here we are. We are live. This is the back channel for the Hack Chat. I will put the YouTube link for folks in Hack Chat, and then also I'll put some links for other folks here. So, Ladyada, Jeff, me, we are on video. So, how about while the Hack Chat spins up, y'all introduce yourselves? I'll say hi later too. Limor, why don't you start?
Hey, hi, it's me, Ladyada. Um, I'm here at my desk and I've been doing a lot of floppy hacking lately. If you can't get chips, you might as well go for stuff that's not available because it's no longer made and hasn't been for 10, 15 years because it's all the same then, right? It's like, why use the most modern when you can use the oldest? So having a good time here. Partnering with me is Jepler. Will introduce themselves in a moment. And we've just been kind of having a good time exploring what you can do with fast, low-cost microcontrollers to read very, very low density media by taking advantage of their peripherals and large amounts of RAM. So it's a good time. And I'm also, I've got lots of floppy disks here and I'm learning a lot. Floppy disks are more complicated than you'd think. When I first started, I was like, how hard could this all be? Like it was hard and then it wasn't hard, then it's back to being hard again. So that's what we're up to here at the Fruit.
Yeah, I'm sure what we'll do is, and I'll pop over to the different chats and line up some of the questions that I see in the comments. The first thing that we'll probably do is have to say like, you can't just get a USB drive from Amazon and read these discs. But anyways, Jeff, why don't you introduce yourself, and then I'll do me at the end.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Epler. I live in Nebraska and I work with Adafruit mostly on CircuitPython, but Limor pulled me in for this floppy project, I guess, because she knows I have a retro in my heart. Although, full disclosure, in about 2005, I got rid of all my old Commodore stuff, including, the computer itself, the floppies. So one big fun thing about this is I can go on eBay and for research purposes and work purposes, pick up old software I remember fondly. So I don't know. That's what I can tell you for now.
Okay. I'll start with me. I'm going to cycle out some of the images in the background. We have some cool rabbits with floppies and stuff like that. I'm Phil. I'm the managing director of Adafruit. I'm also the founder of Hackaday. I designed the logo. Maybe I'll talk about how the logo was almost a floppy sort of back in the day, but I have nothing to do with Hackaday now other than being a fan and helping to run this video chat behind the scenes. What I will do is I will pop over to the Hack Chat once in a while and just put it here so you can see what's going on. I have put the links in the video chats, and then here is Discord as well, because this is, why not make it even more complicated? And then this is my desk right now, where you can see some signed floppies from Woz, Steve Wozniak. There's a signed floppy from the movie Hackers, 9X Freak. And then I have a little mini collection over there. If there's time later, maybe I'll show it. It's like some Hackaday of yesteryear. So we'll see how that goes. And then I've decided to try to make everything extremely complicated with my setup, and so I can do all these things at once. Ladyada will be telling me things to show on the overhead, so I will try to do that, including things like, hey, look, a pair of floppy socks. The socks with floppies on it.
I also have floppy.
Yeah, so we'll do that and more. So we'll see.
I did not expect to see that many feet on this Hack Chat. That's a little interesting.
Yeah, this is our new.
This is Wiki Feet. I don't know if you knew that.
This is our new OnlyFans.
Jeff, show them.
Okay,
your toes.
So let's.
Not today. Sorry.
Let's hit the chat on the Hack Chat because I have to make sure I specify. So I think we should start with the first person says getting more rare and currently on the search for a lot of drives, and it's getting harder to get them. So Goodwill, flea markets.
I think they're out there. I mean, there's millions of disk drives, millions that were made, millions and millions and millions. But I think people don't recognize that they're of some value. And so I think that they'll always be available. I don't think it's ever going to be like impossible to get sort of your common 5 1/4 and 3 1/2 drive, because I think especially, and it's a little bit morbid, but like as there's estate sales for a lot of baby boomers, there's going to be a lot of old computers that make it into eBay and your local thrift store, and I think that's where you'll keep seeing a trickle of them. So I'm not worried about them being available. Like Apple II drives are like surprisingly easy to get. I mean, again, like a lot of these were made, a lot.
Yeah. So here's Deshipu is in the hack chat. So he said, make sure you get a USB floppy drive. We should just start off with why don't they work? So we could put that in the chat. Why don't USB floppy drives always work?
They kind of work, actually, which is a little bit sneaky. So USB floppy drives are actually laptop floppy drives with a small controller board. I have one here, so I can show it off.
Make sure you just there she goes.
Okay. Hi.
Make sure you also post in the chat, the hack chat that is.
Yeah, but maybe if one of you can do it while I'm showing this off, because I have to share my stream thing. Okay, so this is a floppy disk drive, USB. So inside there's this little adapter board, and this is kind of like a special chip that's like an ASIC chip, and it's a no name. Maybe I looked for a data sheet. I didn't spend too much time on it, but basically it connects with a 26-pin floppy cable for laptops. This is a laptop floppy drive. That's why it's thinner, but it's still like a standard. This is a Samsung. Like these are no longer made, but there was, again, hundreds of thousands of these available. The folks who make USB floppy disk drives just get these standard laptop floppies for like your Dell, whatever, ThinkPad. You attach the little FPC on there, and then this just converts IBM 1.44 megabyte MFM to USB. Now, the thing about this chip is it's very specialized. It's only for IBM 1.44 megabyte MFM formatted floppies. So you cannot ever use this to read GCR floppy disks like those from Macs, old Macs. And I think I don't know every format. I know there's tons of like weird Amiga history, but you cannot ever use these for those. However, if you remove this board, this floppy interface is a Shugart 34-pin standard interface. It's just like in it's an FPC. So you can remove this part and replace it with some of the circuitry that Jepler and I have been working on, and it'll work just like a floppy drive. It's just a little bit exposed. So this is standard floppy. This is non-standard, and this is restrictive. I've also found that this is a little bit flaky, and it doesn't, you obviously can't use this for reading the low-level flux. So if you have a damaged diskette, this can't help you. Like it does what it does, and it's like you can't reprogram it, and you can't tweak the timings, and it's very restrictive. So it's like if you have perfect IBM 1.44 megabyte floppies in excellent condition, and everything's wonderful, and you don't need flux level, yes, you can use a USB floppy, but it's not for archiving. Like you can't get flux transitions out of it without a different hardware, and you can't read non-IBM MFM formatted diskettes.
Yeah. So, for instance, the Prince floppy, that doesn't work with a. Yes,
that's a Mac 800K, which is one of the most horrifying floppy disk formats that I've encountered. It was designed for a disk drive that could rotate at different speeds, and it's a triangular format like the Commodore 64 that Jepler's been working on. And I can show, hold on, I can remove this and then stop that. Add, hold on. It's very exciting how hard it is to open up my grease weasel output. So this is the output of the CLI tool we use to read floppies. And you'll notice like all the dots are good sectors, and these are non-existent sectors. That's because on the inner ring of the floppy, right, there's less material. so they have fewer sectors. And it was actually the other way around. It's you can fit more on the outer sectors, on the outer ring, because there's more material. Mac and some other formats like the Commodore 64 did this. They made triangular, there's more on the outside, there's more sectors on the outside. But Apple did this weird trick where they spin the disk at a different speed depending on those sectors. And I think Commodore 64 just packed more into their soft sector format. So yeah, like this is the kind of stuff that, again, a USB floppy drive cannot deal with at all. It's like, what do you mean you have a different number of sectors? They're in this weird ass format. I give up. And so it's scary because people take their old floppy disks that are not, these 1.44 megabyte,
broken,
and they plug them in to a USB floppy disk, and they're like, oh, it says unreadable. It's like, no, just that controller can't read it. The floppy drive actually can probably read it just fine.
Yeah, and then the other thing is the 5 1/4s. Or the other discs. Okay,
yeah, so the Commodore format, as I understand it, they spin it at a constant, I think, 300 RPMs, but the low level, I think they have a shift register to capture the flux. And at any rate, there's something that can operate at one of 4 different bit rates, and they change that dynamically rather than changing the rotational rate dynamically.
Yeah, and then we also have these 8-inch ones. So obviously, there's no USB drive for this. This is a gigantic one, and I have to have a human head for a scale.
Good head size.
That's a big boy.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize the sector, the index pulse was up there.
There's 2 because these are hard sectored, so they they have maybe 2 different. One is the index pulse and one is the sector indicator. So they're probably offset slightly. So there's 8 holes for the sectors and 1 hole for the index. Like, why not have more holes?
All right. So in the chat, there's a question, a little more. Could the flux thing be done with an oscilloscope? It has 20 megs RAM. Symbols.
You could, but there are.
You'll hate it.
You'd hate it, and you have to watch for the index pulse. Yes, you could do it with a logic analyzer. You'd have to control a couple pins. You have to turn the motor on and enable it. But you could do it. I think the thing that's tough is you want to sample at 20 megahertz is actually a very good number for sampling. But then you'd have to get it in and you'd have to format it. So it's almost easier to use a microcontroller, in my opinion. But you could use a logic analyzer or an oscilloscope if you're desperate. But you'd have to write the script to get that data and do something with it. And then stepping through the index to the tracks, before you know it, you've turned your oscilloscope into a microcontroller. With the microcontroller, you might as well choose a microcontroller. Yeah,
that's true. At first, I was thinking, oh, sure, you just have to get the trace over the network or USB or whatever. But yeah, you got to move the drive 80 times. You got to switch the side 160 times before you're done. So you still need a micro for something. Or maybe you use dip switches. I don't know.
I mean, you could do it, right?
Yeah, you absolutely could.
Absolutely could do it. I just don't feel like it. It's just easier for, it's just easier to use a microcontroller because, again, every oscilloscope will vary a little bit. You also need pull-ups and stuff. So yeah, like I said, you basically need a microcontroller. You might as well use a microcontroller.
Yeah. So Dan asks about the sector sensors, that they were optical, and that's correct.
Yes. You want to hold up a...
Sure. Let me turn this one around so we can see the hole.
Yeah.
There we go. No, it just went past it.
I know, you gotta
precision here. See,
how
so
come
you turn it just a little bit.
How come whenever you open the disk, it never has the index sensor there?
That's a good question. We should implement stop spindle on index pulse.
I wonder.
Just for OCD.
3.5s don't have a hole. They use this thing. I'm assuming this is the index.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I thought that was what it grabbed to rotate.
I think so too, but I don't see a. hole.
I have a clear disk here. Maybe we can look at that on the overhead. Let me pop over to
question.
That.
Sneaky. I don't know. Actually, I've seen the index hole on the 5 1/4s for sure. And then those 8-inch ones have Lots.
So, give you an idea what we're talking about here. I don't know how helpful this will be.
Well, now I want to tear open my drive and start looking what the sensor looks like.
As you can see,
Yeah,
this is one of those clear discs.
I couldn't see one on my 3.5, which is, you know,
There's definitely an index pulse comes out of the drive. That's all I can tell you for sure.
I don't think it's that. I don't think it's tiny. It's weird. I never thought to like look for it because that was never an issue. I had more issues with index pulse location.
Oh, you know, I bet Deshipu has it. That mark that you were talking about that lets it grab it, you would just put the sensor on the rotating spindle.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's.
I didn't understand that at first. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's no mechanical punched hole into the media, is what I'm saying. But if you have do you have a 5 1/4 you can hold up with a hole in it? I don't know if you did that while I was.
Yeah, I did do that. But yeah, so whether the sensor within it could be any technology, whatever they liked, but optical's probably cheap and reliable.
It's an optical sensor. There's some reflected sensor. Some disk drives, like the Apple II, famously does not have an index sensor. It's purely soft sectored, which also uses a copy protection method, and it was a cost saving measure.
Commodore as well.
Yeah, they're like, well, let's just leave the index sensor out because like that, you know, we'll make it a couple bucks cheaper. They were really focused on trying to get it down to like, you know, a couple $100. So these are, you know, Shugart drives with a bunch of stuff removed.
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, I don't see why they need it. You could read MFM off of a DOS floppy without looking at the index pulse at all because the sectors mark themselves.
Yeah. That's, I think, that their philosophy. I mean, I think the index, it kind of doesn't make sense. Like once you know, why do you actually need an index pulse? It doesn't seem that essential. I mean, with hard sectors, yes, I get it. But like, it is a little bit unclear. Like, was it to, I guess it's to like just calibrate the drive speed. Maybe the drive motors weren't very good. And then, maybe on the Apple II, I don't know how they calibrated the drive speed, or maybe they just said like, fuck it, you know, the drive speed is calibrated on the motor, not on the floppy disk.
Yeah, they seem to be pretty well calibrated. I mean, these drives that I have, which are just eBay of unknown provenance, they're fine. The software deals with them okay.
All right, I put up the hack chat there. I would say take a look at some of the comments that are going on there. And Index Pulse needs to get the formatting right, all the tracks in line. I was posting up links and stuff. There is a question from one of the other chats. Is there a manufacturer that still makes floppies?
I don't know if they're still manufactured, but you can still get them. You can get sealed boxes of floppies still. I mean, I got a sealed box of double densities because I wanted to play around with Mac 800K formatting, and that you actually need double density disks if you're trying to make 800K Mac floppy drives. You can't actually use high density disks. It's like I just taped over the hole, but the magnetic density actually messes with the magnetic head on non-Mac disk readers. So it's one of those things where it's like it's digital until it's not. It's actually a very analog process, and especially playing around with these Mac 800K formats. It's you can absolutely read them with IBM PC floppy drives, but not all of the floppy drives, and not all of the floppy diskettes, especially if they're taped over high density ones. I don't know if this doesn't. Yeah, like it doesn't like this because the magnetic flux actually is not designed for such long pulses. It's very interesting.
Okay, question in the hack chat if you want to answer it. Double density floppies read both sides at the same time when reading the data.
Double density is just the flux density. Double-sided is when you have a disk drive that has two heads. And you cannot read them at the same time, but you can alternate which head you want to select. There's actually a line on the Shugart connector that will let you select which side, and that's the head. So you select which head you want. Not all disk drives are dual head, dual sided, like Jepler was chatting about.
Commodore and the Apple II and so forth
Or single,
Yeah.
were single.
again for
Cost
price, cost savings. And that's another reason why they didn't have the index sensors. Then you could flip the disk over and use the other side, which you can't do if you're using an index sensor, because now you have to have two index sensors, one on each side of the disk drive. Although I guess they could have put it in the center.
There are double punched floppies. I have
There are,
one.
and you have one, which is very, very weird. And like it's good luck. It's like a 4-leaf clover. Very unusual to see a double punched floppy disk.
Yeah, there were, of course, tons of commercially manufactured disks for the Commodore that had data on both sides, but I'm sure they just used a double-sided system to do the mastering.
Yeah, here's a Commodore drive, by the way, just so folks can see.
Oh my gosh, I can hear how heavy that is.
Yeah.
Hold it up.
Yeah, it's bending the light around me. That's how large it is. So this is look at this. They don't make them like this to fuse in the back and everything. And then because there's green on this, and I have a green screen going on, you're not going to be able to see that. But this will give you an idea. And then Atari has one as well, not as heavy. Oof. And this is the Atari 1050.
I haven't done anything with the Atari disks yet. My impression is they are a lot closer to PC drives, and so the copy protection isn't as interesting.
Yeah.
We'll find out, though.
Yeah, like we're slowly. So, the first thing we did was get IBM PC formatting, and IBM PC uses MFM, and even the later Macs. Like I was talking about Mac 800K, because I'm personally emotionally invested in Mac 800K floppies, whereas Jeff is emotionally invested in the Commodore 64. And while we're emotionally invested in those, it's easier to get going with IBM MFM format, because eventually that won. Everyone was like, yes, we could squeeze more data into a diskette using the triangular sectors and like variable speeds, but you know what? It's easier if everyone just has the same hardware. And the disk drives that you can get really are optimized for MFM, like at the analog level. The way that they read and manage the gain of the flux head is dependent on MFM. Like they want MFM pulses, and they want that kind of formatting. And the cheaper the drive, the more specific, more tuned it was, right? So it's like you really couldn't use anything else. So what Jepler has done, which is really cool, is add MFM formatting parsing to CircuitPython, which I think is hilarious. So you can actually read the disk as a SD, like a kind of like an SD card.
It into a USB storage device.
It's a USB storage device.
Yeah, it shows up. We're gonna try to get the icon to look like that, but
yeah, and the reason, yes, you could. Well, it actually Windows automatically puts the floppy disk icon if it's a 1.44 megabyte, because it's like like this.
What else could it be?
This is an 80 track, 2 heads. Okay, like I know what this is. This is a floppy drive. And the reason it's so easy is because IBM MFM formatting is the same exact formatting that you use for SD cards. It's this, like, an SD card to the operating system and a floppy disk are identical. It looks the same in format. 512 byte sectors, right? Which is funny because it's like when you interface with an SD card, you're like, how come we're using 512 bytes? Where did this idea of 512 bytes come from? It's like that came from a floppy disk. It's like these things came up with the idea of using 512 byte sectors. And in the history of time, it's like those stories of like, why are trains like this wide? And it like goes back to like 2-horse carriages in Rome, right? Like they fixed a standard gauge, they fixed a standard sector size. So the code, the SCSI commands to read and write from a floppy disk and SD card, they write the sectors in the same format, using FAT12 and FAT16.
Before I type this in the hack chat, you made that work, the USB floppy with the 1.44s and the 1.2s, right?
I got it working with the 360K.
With the 360K, all right.
Yeah, it's mostly an issue of like you have to kind of hard code like if it's a 360K, how many sectors are you expecting? And I just kind of like only had it. I had like 1 5 1/4 disk, and it was like a 360K. So like I got that working, but I just don't have a 720. And although I do now, I'm going to check. I ordered some double density disks, and I have a 1.2, and so that should be able to get those working. It's just a matter of like you just in the floppy definition, there's a little table of like how many sectors you're expecting. Although we could do that dynamically by reading track 1 and just kind of counting how many sectors we found.
Yeah, and there's a spot in the boot block, so that very first block, which says what the floppy geometry is supposed to be. So a couple different tricks you can try.
One thing is it's hard to keep track of all this, so we've been posting like these little videos. So if you go on our YouTube channel, there's a playlist that goes 1 by 1 by 1 by 1 by 1, because I forgot that we did the 800K one until I'm like, oh yeah, we have the thumbnail of it, and it has Limor wrote 800K on it. So that's how I remember stuff. I'm going to put a link to that in the chat so folks can follow along, because we're going to probably keep adding more videos to that playlist.
Yeah.
As soon as I get the next thing going, I'll do another 1 minute video for you.
Yeah.
So Nick has a question about this is the thing I was like, if I'm going to teach you one thing during this hack chat, you'd think that the floppy drive would not care if it's GCR or MFM, because you would think it's flux pulses. Flux, who cares? The flux pulse comes out. It's the controller that determines how to decode it, and that's actually not true. It should be true, but it's not true. So if you look at this reading, this is a Sony MPF 920. And the Sony MPF 920 is a wonderful disk drive that doesn't care whether it's GCR or MFM formatted. It's a very fine disk drive. I like it very, very much because it's happy to read both GCR width pulses and MFM width pulses. They're different widths. But if I swap it for my least favorite, well, I don't want to say it out loud because I don't want to hurt his feelings, but this Panasonic, the Panasonic's not too bad, but it's the teak that's actually quite naughty. The NEC FD1231M, okay? Very naughty drive, very inexpensive because it does not read GCR length flux pulses. It actually freaks out because it was really, really designed only to read the 234 microsecond pulse widths of MFM, and the automatic gain for the magnetic read head, it can probably write them because like writing is whatever, you just write whatever length you want. But the read head, if the pulses are too short, it filters them out. And when the pulses get too long, the automatic gain control starts like it starts ramping up way too quickly, and it starts reading phantom flux pulses. So when maybe I'll hook this up and I'll try a disk read so you can see. The very short pulses and the very long pulses, depending on where they are in the length of the triangular tracks, won't read, but the middle ones read fine, because the lengths of the GCR pulses don't match up with the kind of standard MFM 2, 3, 4 microsecond pulses. So it should work, but it doesn't always. But Sony drives are okay if you're lucky enough to get a Sony drive.
Where do you pick up yours, in case someone asks?
When I get a Sony, when I eBayed it, I specifically looked for a Sony drive because I specifically want to read these Mac 800K floppies. So I'll try swapping it out, and I'll see if I can replicate. Ironically, it might just work because it does depend on
because
the
gremlins.
Yeah.
I got some of my starter hardware from a local friend, and he gave me one Sony and one, is it pronounced teak drive?
I say teak, but yeah, I don't know.
And yeah, I can report the same thing, that the Sony will read the Mac floppy with our little board, and the teak won't. So just one of those things.
Yeah, I mean, Sony, I think, was using some Apple products, so it's not surprising. They're probably like, well, we'll have one controller for all of them.
Yeah.
And they're probably a little bit more expensive. But like, if you're selling IBM PC towers for $999, you're going to pick, are you going to go with the $25 or the $35 drive? Probably go with the $25.
Well, do you think that this optimization for the 2, 3, and 4 microsecond pulses was for achieved? Was it for cost savings, or was it to make more reliable? Because
I think
the second thing also occurs to me.
I think it's a combination, right? I think that it could be that the game control or the floppy head wasn't the read sensor wasn't as good, and so they're like, okay, well, we have more spurious flux pulses, and so we have to have stronger filtering to account for that, and so it's kind of like a side effect. If you have like a very good quality read head, you probably don't have a lot of spurious readings. But if you're going with a cheaper one, I mean, I'm assuming, like, I don't know, it would be great to get an NEC floppy.
Somebody who will tell you the truth.
Tell you the truth. But if I had to get, I mean, like, from when I was building PCs as a kid, Sony drives were the nice drives, and NEC drives were not as nice. They were less expensive.
Someone in the chat says, psyched about this work. I have code I wrote in college on some floppies. I implemented RSA encryption when I was a senior in 86. When I was a senior, being ran on a VAX 11780. Yep, VAX MIPS are based on this machine. I'd really like to see how fast it runs on my M1 Mac Mini. Yep.
The best day to copy your data off of floppies is today.
Yeah.
That is 100%. Yeah, because it may not be there tomorrow.
Well, when Anil came over and we were first trying to figure out if we could get what's off the Prince floppy, we had a USB floppy drive, and you pop it in and it's like, oh, makes noise, doesn't show up. Oh, guess the data rotted away. Then we had a PowerBook 180, popped it in, worked. And then we're like, oh, this requires us to look into what's going on, because most people, I think, probably do that. And they have floppies that they're about to toss, or they try it. They have a USB drive. There's a format that's not being read. If it's the real floppies, the 5-inch ones, then you have a really big problem, because they don't make a USB drive for that. So, anyways,
I'm imaging a disk on the NEC, and then I'll once it comes up with a graph, I'll show what it looks like to read a GCR disk on a non-Sony drive. I mean, like, I think this is important because, again, if people are imaging floppies, we want to categorize and classify all of these different disk drives for like these kind of weird ass formats, because it does matter. And a lot of these disks are going bad, because like even the Commodore 64 ones especially, like I have to clean that head every single disk. Like I have like my bottle of like 99% IPA, and I have a Q-tips, and I clean the head off, because the magnetic media flakes off. Like you can hear it. It's scratching, and like one disk, if it's flaking off, it'll scratch all the disks afterwards. So you have to be very careful. And people don't realize it could be the drive that's bad, not the diskette that's bad.
And then I'm going to just put this, because we're going to be finished with Hack Chat soon. This is probably a good question to answer. How long do you think the data is going to be good? Someone says up to 30 years. It looks like it's been fine. I think it's going to depend on all sorts of things: where you live, the humidity, how was it stored? Was it crushed? I'm sure it's
5 1/4 definitely are not going to do as well as 3 1/2. So 3 1/2 are, I think they're protected a lot better.
They come with their own case.
And they come with a harder case. I think the 5 1/4 have seen a lot more damage to them than the 3 1/2. There's just more dust that gets in too.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to how long is the data likely to be good, but if you get that disk out and put it in a drive, I feel like it should be for archiving it, rather than, I'll just see if this game loads and then decide what to do.
Yeah.
I think move number one is get it in the most durable format you can into your computer.
Yes, this is me reading. This is the NEC. Maybe it was the Panasonic that had more trouble, but you can see as you get to those higher track numbers, you start seeing, these Bs are bad. I read them with the Sony, and every sector was totally fine. But even with retries, like retrying 5 times per sector, especially as you get to the higher tracks, and you see it kind of starts where the GCR pulses change, because the number of sectors start start
the
changing.
number of microseconds of one flux changes too.
They start changing, and that's what I'm saying. And also, you can see there's a difference between the heads. The top head is tuned a little bit different than the bottom one. The bottom one's actually a little bit more able to read the sectors correctly. So it's totally like the concept of, oh, it's a flux pulse. It's a flux pulse is actually not true. What you're getting out of your disk drive is filtered data. It's not the raw data. It's gone through an analog stage that is filtering and adjusting what it's reading, and so it's not always trustworthy. Is what I'm saying. The drives aren't just drives; they're complicated systems.
A couple last questions in the hack chat if you want to check them out. Looks like someone stored their 5 1/4. What would be the most durable format for storing data at home now? And then some folks said that baking the disk could potentially work. And yeah, I guess I'm going to agree. Like SSDs are probably the most durable.
I think
right now.
something that is live and you continuously make sure you are copying it onto whatever we're using tomorrow. Something that you put away, you don't know the status of it. Yeah. But if you've got like a mirrored SSD or even a hard drive in your computer, you have some warning when something goes wrong, you copy the data around. The only thing that works is to be active and proactive about your data. Not say, oh, an SSD will be valid for 40 years, so I'll come back in 35 years and copy it. That's never going to work.
I always like to look at the calendar and say, oh, my warranty is going to go on this like MacBook. So I should just get another one, back it up, and just put a nail through it and just at least have that level of control instead of just it happening not expectedly. But I haven't done that. But I think you're right. Like what I've been doing is whatever media format I have, I try to cycle it out. Like 1 is none and 2 is few. And so I'm always kind of like making sure there's 2 copies of something. And there's never just one. So I don't know if that helps. Some folks have clay tablets as a storage medium. Yeah, I guess. Need a lot.
All right, Thomas asks, can the oscilloscope approach give better chances of recovering old data? And the answer is yes, maybe, but only if you're skipping over that drive automatic gain control on the head, right? If the head is unable to read stuff, you can skip over it if you want to and solder directly to the sensor. And like you'll probably need to put your own, gain circuitry on it to read it. But
I feel like I've read a war story where some guy who was preserving floppy did exactly
do it.
this.
Yeah, you can do it and you can read it. It's a hell of a lot of work. In theory, if there's 1-bit errors, you can fix it, like for the GCR pulse thing, right? Like I actually looked at the flux pulses from this NEC drive to look at, like what's going on. And I compared the flux pulses from the Sony disk, and I could see, like if you do a histogram of the flux pulses, which is actually like the best way to analyze it, because you should see like 3 spikes for the 3 different, if MFM, you would see 3 spikes. With GCR, I think it's like 3 or 5 spikes, I don't remember. And you start to see like little bumps in other values. And when you look at like the flux data itself, you could see, oh, if I took these 3 and added them together, they would be a value, there would be a valid number. So there are some, if that's the kind of errors you're getting where your flux pulses are weak enough that the head isn't reading them, and so it sees maybe multiple inversions or it gets confused. I actually think that there is a Python plus NumPy, just sit down and just do a lot of statistical analysis, and you can glue together and then do the CRCs on, because the GCR, there's only a couple of different valid values. It's like 5 bits that encodes 4 or 4 that encodes 3 or something. You could kind of like mess around and maybe like brute force it to try to figure out what the valid values are. Or you could, again, try multiple drives. You're going to get different responses depending on them.
And I actually found the story I'm thinking of. It's a Hackaday, so I will drop that in the hack chat kind of as a way to close this out.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, you can do it. It's very interesting. Again, it's like when I first got, a floppy just like a month ago, or over Christmas break, I think I got some floppy drives and started reading data. I was like, oh, it's digital data out. What's the big deal? And it's like, oh boy, like that was an assumption, like if 99% of the time, yes, and then 1% isn't. But you know, I'm still thinking about that. You know, the floppy analysis for GCR, but for now, I'm just going to stick with this Sony drive. And that's it.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
We had a floppy time. Phil, do you want to show off the?
Well, yeah. What I thought I would
or?
do, yeah, what I thought I would do is because I brought this this Hackaday stuff here and this other thing, so I'm just gonna maximize my window here so you can see the overhead. My microphone should still work, and then I'm gonna move me around here so I can actually go over here. So let's see. So all right, y'all can see that. So here is the giant 8-inch floppy drive that we've got. So this is kind of a monster.
Is that the one that is directly powered off of like AC voltage?
Yeah, for the 8-inch drive, we actually, you know, I got separately an 8-inch disk drive holder. Just because it looked really cool, to be honest. I was like, this is the coolest. It's like this like big enclosure, but it turns out I actually need it because this runs off of 120 volt. And I had to get a new belt for this because the belt was missing. But you can see it has a belt now. And, you know, we've got the cable too. And this one I feel like is in good condition. Leaded solder, let me tell you guys, it's like a fucking miracle. I mean, look at this thing. It looks new. Yeah. And it's at least 40 years old, and it's still shiny, and every solder joint is like this beautiful marking. And I think the heads look good too. So I think this was a good find. But yeah, it's 120 volt powered, and you actually have to get a different. You have to be careful because there's 120 volt 60 hertz and 220 50 hertz, and the hertz is used as part of the timing for the belt. So you have to get different belts depending on whether it's a 60 hertz or a 50 hertz drive, which is very exciting.
Here's the longer ones, and then part of the collection of weird things.
That's the 8-inch drive cable. So yeah, it's an edge connect.
This is signed just from Wozniak, and then we got this clear one that was just kind of interesting when we were buying up some things. And then this is from Phantom Freak from the movie Hackers. And then this, because I just had to bring stuff from the wall over here because there were some floppies. This is some previous Hackaday things. You can see 10th anniversary. It says here's a badge that we did a long time ago. And then I also got some pins here. So this concludes the tour of the desk here. Yeah, and I think I showed the floppy socks because it's all floppy all the time at the moment.
So there's like no processor as we would understand the term today on that old 8-inch floppy. It's just logic and analog.
It's logic, yeah. It's not. There's no like microcontroller or microprocessor, I don't think. Although the Commodore 64 did, which is fascinating. There's a separate chip that reads like what York commands basically, and handles your disk drive reading and writing, which is amazing. The Commodore 64 is like it's a kind of a mystical different land of, you know, it's like a Madagascar of floppy disk design. It's like, okay, I didn't think of doing that, but it's interesting that you did, and like I'm sure there's a good reason for it.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff and Ladyada, for being part of this. Thanks, did it.
Everybody who's watching.
Yeah. All right. I'll see you later tonight, Jeff. More.
All right.
All right. Well, yeah. Tune in for later on. We're going to be doing lots more show and tells, shows, and more. Lots of exciting stuff. Just wrapping up all that stuff now. All right. Back to the floppy.
Okay.
Back to the floppy.
Thanks, folks.